Heyo guys, I'm Vel, and today we're going to talk about Akashic Records of Bastard Magic Instructor. This anime came out during spring of 2017, along with several other animes that I enjoyed, such as the Danmachi spin-off, Sword Oratorio. Akashic Records is an interesting thing to me because I haven't really heard about it from anyone besides a few people that I've introduced it to. And since people don't really talk about it, I felt that this would be a perfect way to kick off this series discussing every anime I've ever seen. This is the easily Amused Weeb, and by what that name implies, you'll notice that I enjoy a lot of things. I wanted to do the series to discuss those things which I've enjoyed, or even things that I kind of hated, and start a discussion with other fellow anime fans. I've really enjoyed discussing my differing opinions with my friends, or even just random people in the community, and I enjoy learning why others like or dislike a thing that I genuinely enjoy. Keep in mind that I classify this as a discussion/light review series, so it won't be too great of a review since it's fairly casual, but I will be trying my best to get better at reviewing things as the series goes on. To start this off, I'm going to give a brief explanation on how I rate animes. I judge animes based on how I believe it deals with the strengths and weaknesses of its main genre, rather than the usual cookie-cutter template that I've noticed people using around the communities I've been in. My rating system uses an enjoyment scale that goes from 1 to 3, and a technical scale that lightly goes over how I view the technicals, spanning from 1 to 5 stars. I give Akashic Records of Bastard Magic Instructor a 3E 4 star. For those of you who want to know why I give it this rating, please stick around, but be mindful that I may end up spoiling some things for you. This particular show is one of my favorites of all the anime I've watched because of how much I've enjoyed it. Akashic Records honestly shouldn't have been anywhere near as great as what it was, because the story for the series is overly generic, but it makes up for that genericness with its writing by giving us some pretty well-written characters. This is a fantasy anime that blends two of my favorite kinds of anime tropes together, the overpowered main character and the seemingly incompetent teacher. While this anime is not perfect by any means, it truly understands the genre it's in, and the tropes that it conveys, and that makes the anime an overall amazing experience if you enjoy this kind of thing. The anime stars Glenn Radars, a shut-in person who aspired to become a mage of justice as a child, but something unforeseen caused him to start hating magic after experiencing some later explained hardships on his path. He's a very apathetic and perverted person who reluctantly takes a job at Alzano Magic Academy after being forced by his guardian, Celica Orphonia. Our other main characters, with whom we get quickly acquainted with, are Sistine Fabel and Rumia Tingel. Sistine, often referred to as White Cat or Sisti by our other main characters, is the series tsundere. In the early episodes of the series, she frequently belittles Glenn because she sees him as a waste of academic resources, and as someone who is blighting the reputation of their esteemed magic school. Sistine is also a very ambitious girl who constantly strives to better herself throughout the series, all for the purpose of trying to carry out her dream, and also to protect her friend Rumia. Rumia Tingel is a very close friend of Sistine, and she's your stereotypical sweetheart character. She's the perfect complementing personality for Sistine, for she's basically her voice of reason, who constantly tries to calm her down after Glenn does something that pisses her off, among the various other conflicts throughout the episodes. Rumia is quiet and tends to keep to herself, and she really enjoyed the company of her previous teacher before Glenn's arrival to the classroom, but she's also really the first person to warm up to Glenn. Much later in the series, we are introduced to another main character, and she's absolutely my favorite. Her name is Riel. Riel is the series kudere, who has something more to her. She doesn't have much in terms of emotions, so it's very endearing to see her slowly warm up to the other cast that was previously introduced. While she is a kudere, she does have very few moments within the series where she has pretty explosive bouts of emotion, showing a completely different personality than what you would expect from her. Lastly, we can't not mention Celica Arphonia when we're talking about characters. Celica Arphonia is the guardian and mentor of our main character Glenn. She has an immense amount of trust for our main character, and serves as a sort of guide for the series. You don't really find out a whole lot about her throughout the series, but the only thing you kind of understand is that she's an incredibly strong mage who is held to a very high regard within the kingdom. With character introductions out of the way, let's talk about the main focus of the series. Glenn is an overpowered character, and while some of you might not enjoy that sort of thing, it is truly what makes the series enjoyable, besides the few interactions he has with the other major and minor characters. The thing that makes him overpowered is a spell that he created himself, which he calls the Fool's World, and it causes everyone within the immediate vicinity of him to be unable to use their magic, including himself. His overpowered nature is very unorthodox by the usual standards you see around other OP characters, seeing as its very apparent downside ends up being hilarious since you'll see a couple fistfights in an anime that's supposed to be about magic. While Fool's World is an overpowered spell, the series doesn't heavily rely on it, which helps show that Glenn is a fully capable Magus without his trump card. This anime has a major plus in my books because it shows that while Glenn is certainly an overpowered person, he's also not infallible, since he's shown having lost or struggling several times throughout the series, only to have won certain fights with the help of our other main characters. The story of Akashic Records is pretty run-of-the-mill in terms of what it is, even if it is a fantasy slice-of-life anime with some action thrown into the mix. A large portion of it is Glenn teaching the students in his unorthodox ways, since this was the way he came about to learn it. The series is about 4 3-episode arcs, which focuses on each of the main characters and uses that focus in a good way to develop each of the characters that are pretty essential to that particular part of the plot. Each of these arcs have a pretty basic structure in terms of plot, so they become fairly predictable, and it's one of the few gripes that I really have about the series, aside from the small bits of generic drama here and there. Since the episodes are pretty predictable plot-wise, you can pretty much guess who aligns where in the series, but there are times where it does correctly do a red herring, and I can greatly appreciate that. The generic bits of Akashic Records stands out quite a bit, and it can be a possible negative to anyone interested in the series. It involves really cliched moments, and pokes a lot of fun at overused cliches, but that in itself can also be a detractor for people interested in the series. Every arc has something that has a downside to it, but I feel that it fully makes up for it with how enjoyable the characters and their dynamics are, because without them I'm sure no one would even enjoy this anime. A good thing to really note is that if you come in expecting the best, you'll probably end up being disappointed considering that some parts of the story are clear deus ex machinas. The series has some pretty decent character development, and its biggest positive is the development of Glenn and the relationship that he has with his students. The series starts with everyone hating Glenn, thinking that he's a nuisance who shouldn't be there, while he was just trying to shirk his responsibilities of being a school teacher. As the series progresses, and after a few altercations with Sistine, he starts getting serious about being a teacher. His personality gets a lot less cynical, and everyone notices how smart he is with how he teaches them new things that practically destroys everything that they thought they knew about magic. These characters even have an impact so strong on Glenn that he gets visibly worried about their safety in certain parts of the series. The villains in this series are pretty awful in their writing, and as such they tend to do very stupid things, such as give the main character time to actually do something against them. They leave much to be desired, and I feel that they could have been a lot better if they had more care put into them. There are very few villains in the series that are easy to remember besides the generic entry yandere villain, and the final villain that's introduced in the season. as they would lead on to the bigger problems of the series that would come about in further seasons. Akashic Records' ending is pretty dull. Out of all the 4 arcs, it's the one that's the most disappointing because it feels so short, but it does give you some much needed insight on Glenn's past. The only really good part about this arc is that you get to see Glenn showcasing his magical prowess, which might make other people feel that this ending is satisfying. There is a silver lining in all this though, but that's only because the anime is left with an opening for a second season, since the plot is really just beginning in the anime towards the end. The ending leaves you wanting more, because the likely end goal of the series gets teased, the Akashic Records, and it really disappoints me that it ended like this solely because there's really no knowing if this anime is ever going to get a second season. If this ever gets a second season, the better parts of the story should start showing, since the entire anime pretty much warms you up for the real meat towards the end, so to speak. As this episode comes to a close, I only really have a few more things to talk about, so consider this next section a sort of honorable mentions. The art of Akashic Records is really something that's nice to look at. If you look at it too closely, you will find several errors such as lines overlapping or overstepping where they should be, but that's all unnoticeable unless you like to inspect anime art at a closer level. While it's not the best by a long shot, it does provide a pretty great amount of eye candy and can serve as a good distraction from the fairly generic story, especially when coupled with the whimsical music that's played in the background throughout its runtime. Since I've watched the anime in both subbed and dubbed versions, I feel I should mention that the dub does include some really well done translations, and in some parts of it, I feel that the dub did even better than the original in terms of its dialogue. I first watched the anime in its dub, so I might be a little biased towards it, but I found it absolutely hilarious, while the original I felt was very stiff at times because the dialogue felt kind of forced. In the end, who is this anime really for? Well, I'd recommend people with beginner to intermediate experience with watching anime to view it. The series is very basic in some degrees, so a lot of the more experienced viewers might end up feeling some resentment towards the generic storyline, but the lesser experienced anime viewers may be able to appreciate a lot of the anime because of how likable the characters are. The fact that just about everyone in this anime is a recognizable archetype can make it a very good introduction for people who are interested in anime. It's a bit rough to watch, but if you're able to look past all the parts that are tough to watch, and push past it, you're more than likely going to end up loving it like I do. I'd love to know how everyone feels about this anime. Did you enjoy it or did you hate it? I'd enjoy it if you would share your thoughts and experiences about this anime so I can pick your brains on it a bit. If you like this, you should subscribe for more and stay tuned because the next anime I plan on doing is High Score Girl. See you then.
Nice.